My name's Craig James and I'm the President of Bayside Regional Tennis Association, and on behalf of the BRTA and the Rabban Districts Junior Tennis Association, who of course would normally be playing tennis at 9:30 on a Saturday morning, I'd like to welcome our two special guests today, Tina Samara from Colorado. It's 5:30 at night over there, so after this I guess she's off to make dinner, and Cliff Louvet, who's the coach at Hampton Tennis Club, and they're going to talk to us about, looked at the going to the ITF Junior Circuit on Tuesday, and now we're going to look at that next step of going to US college tennis. Now, Tina was born in Oslo in Norway, moved to New York, and then attended the University of Georgia, where she was a two-time All-American and won the NCAA championship there, Division I tennis championship, and actually participated in the deciding doubles match, I believe, that won the whole thing. Then she went on to become head coach at the University of Louisiana, West Virginia University, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the University of the Pacific. She also played for 4 years in 12 Federation Cup ties for Norway, but now she works with Ace Coach and is what they call a transition coach, which is helping players move to the college ranks. I'm sure Tina and Cliff can tell you far more about it than I can, so I'll hand over to them.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Yeah, guys, welcome back. I know, I think Tuesday went quite well, and we've been looking forward to this. So, again, if you have any questions, just jump in at any time. You know how to do it in the chat, or just stick your hand up and we'll try and get you on there to talk. But as you heard from Craig, Tina's got a lot of experience in this, coaching college tennis for 11 years. So you're not going to get better information anywhere else. I can guarantee that. Tina, I think a lot of our kids and people listening today some of them will be quite young and have very little idea of actually just what college sport is and college tennis. I think it's pretty different in Australia compared to what it is in the States. So maybe you could just start us off there. What is it? How does it work?
Yeah.
Etc.
Well, obviously, specifically in tennis, it's a really interesting and fun experience, because tennis prior and after is very rarely a team sport outside of playing Fed Cup or Davis Cup, or team events that are few and far between. So I think what most of my friends that I've played with or that I know, and college coaches that played, and what we all talk about is how much we enjoyed the team experience, because tennis rarely has that sort of feel. I think especially on the girls' side, sometimes in the beginning it can be tough, because you're used to kind of being the superstar from where you came from and having all the attention, and now you're sharing the attention. But as long as you're able to get through that, I think it was really, it was a tough 4 years for me. It wasn't perfect. It didn't, it had its ups and downs, but no doubt would do it all over again. Just to have that kind of go through those tough times and have players to your left and to your right that push you and drag you along when you need to be dragged. So, I think you really learn a little bit more about how to care about a bigger picture, not just my result, but okay, even if I can stay out on the court longer, I might not win, but if I can just make the match last a little longer, it might help my teammate next door who's about to win her match. So, I highly recommend college athletics in general, but tennis in particular, because it's, again, not a team sport at really any other time, is a really unique experience.
It's quite interesting you say that. I mean, I've heard, I was obviously also at college, and I absolutely loved it. I'd do it in a heartbeat again. I really enjoy all of it, every aspect. The college life is playing tennis, but then you also get the other side of it. I've had a couple of kids who've gone to college and they haven't really enjoyed it. So it's interesting to hear your perspective when you say it wasn't perfect, but you would do it all over again, because I think a lot of the time that's sort of where people are looking.
Yeah.
They're either looking for the perfect experience or it's not for them.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that is what I'm hoping and trying to do with my current business, which is making sure I really make the odds better for players and athletes to be going to the right school. I mean, the reality is I had two teammates that I'm still very good friends with that both either quit or left the team after winning 3 national titles, which sounds super weird. Like, why would you ever leave a team? Because obviously on paper it sounds like that would be the greatest thing in the world, but for those 2 athletes, for various different reasons, for each of them it wasn't. And I have no doubt that maybe had they made a different decision or been more informed or knew more about the school and the coaching and all that stuff, they might have made a different decision and been happier. So the reality there is winning national titles doesn't always mean you're going to have a great experience either. So it's super important to look at the bigger picture of where, all kinds of things that factor in what you want to study, what kind of coaching methods they use, what kind of teammates you have, what kind of environment you're going to be in, because all that factors into ultimately whether you're going to enjoy the experience.
I think that just goes generally for tennis, people, it's not just about the winning the result. There's so much more that you get out of it, and just the enjoyment of training to try and get the best out of yourself, etc. I think a lot of the time we get too caught up in the result.
100%.
Anyway, I got a video here that we'll get started with. It's just something from the USTA, and just to give you guys a little bit more insight into college tennis and some of the current professionals that have played college tennis and their thoughts on it. So get you going. Tina, we might need to turn off our mics for this.
Okay.
Apparently Tuesday we had a little bit of feedback from the video.
See how I turn off my mic on this.
Just on the top above the slide, there's a thing that says turn off audio.
Oh, here we go. Got it.
There we go. All right. Okay. Can you guys see that? Tina, can you see that? No. Oh, there we go.
Cliff, I might run it from here and see how we go.
I think I got it there, Craig.
Okay, perfect.
What I cherish most about my college experience is that I learned what kind of person I could be and what kind of tennis player I could be.
I got to practice with really great players every single day, and I got a lot stronger physically and mentally. Playing in the team environment, it makes you a better competitor. I know it helped me out a lot.
College is not just about yourself. You're playing for your team, and now we're playing for the ultimate team, the Davis Cup team.
College was a blast. We had the time of our life. We learned the chest bump. We won a couple national titles.
Going to college is a positive experience. I know when I'm done playing tennis, I'm always going to have a degree to fall back on.
Varsity Tennis, recreational tennis on campus. The USTA supports college tennis and higher education and young players.
All right, so guys, like you saw there are a lot of current professionals and former professionals that have played college tennis, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of team environment, like Tina was saying earlier. You saw the Bryan brothers chest thumping, and it's not just them. That's pretty normal in college tennis. I think Tina will attest to. So, Tina, like I said, a lot of people I think will be hearing for the first time about college tennis. So maybe you could go in a little bit about the divisions, NCAA versus junior college, NAIA, etc.
Yeah. So the one I guess that most people know of is the NCAA Division I, because on paper that's sort of considered the highest level of tennis collegiately, which is generally, in some ways it's true, in some ways it's not, and that's what's really important to get across, I think, to people. So first also there's Division 1, 2, and 3, and I think the problem with that is we think of 1 being better than 2 and 2 being better than 3, whereas there's a big difference beyond level that plays into that. So Division 1, if you're going to go play Division 1, all of your aid, any kind of financial aid you're going to get is going to be athletically related to your level in your sport, and obviously what the coach thinks you should get on the men's side. On the women's side, in Division 1, generally most of Division 1 is full scholarship or nothing. Then Division 2 is sort of a combination of athletics and academics. So you might get X amount of money because you're a great student and X amount of money because the coach thinks you're a great player, and then that could add up to potentially a full scholarship when you add it up. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where the money's coming from. It matters really how much you're coming out of pocket. And then Division III is the flip of Division I, where all the money's academic related. So all of your money is going to be dictated by your test scores and your GPA and different sorts of things based on that part of your all of your academic stuff. Now, that being said, there's some great players at every level. There are top players in all divisions that are capable of playing at the highest level at Division I, but some people choose to go Division III because they don't want Division III. They're a little bit more relaxed in terms of the schedule and in terms of your being allowed to potentially miss a practice because you have a huge exam or something like that. Whereas on the flip side, Division I, you're going to have a lot less room to, be missing practices, or regardless of whether you have a big exam. And that's also going to vary from coach to coach. But Division I is going to be a little bit more rigid in terms of the expectation on a regular basis of your time commitment to the sport. And Division II, again, I honestly believe it's hit and miss depending on the coach. For example, one of my really good friends who happens to be Aussie, Amy Jensen, who won 3 national doubles titles at Berkeley, and she won with 2 different partners, so she's kind of good. She coaches at Santa Cruz, which is Division III, and she's coached at Division I as well. So she's the same coach whether she coached at Denver in top 30 program or whether she coaches at Santa Cruz at a Division III level. I can guarantee you her skill set is the same. So that's another good example of sometimes if you're really looking to develop, you might choose to go there instead of to a mid-major Division I or lower level Division I because you want a coach that really is going to make you better. And sometimes that might not be the coaches at the schools on paper that you think are better. Then NAIA is sort of a competitor of the NCAA essentially, but not really. But at the end of the day, it's structured pretty much similar to to NCAA, but generally smaller towns. They're not going to be in major cities like the flagship schools like the University of Georgia or Florida, Texas, so they're going to be smaller schools in smaller towns. Again, they're really, I think, hit and miss in terms of depending on what you want, but you can get a tremendous education at these schools and tremendous playing experience at these schools as well. Potentially, in my opinion, from the standpoint I take with my job is, to find out what your goals are, and it might be you have to do a little bit more research to make sure at an NAIA or D2 school that you're going to get what you want. Whereas Division I, you're going to get X amount of matches against this type of level teams because their mandated schedule's a little bit more rigid in how they structure things. And then junior college, which is an amazing opportunity as well, which I think there's 2 specific types of players that really benefit from junior college, which is a 2-year degree, and then what you do is you transfer potentially to a Division I, 2, or 3 school, depending on what you want. The 2 athletes that really fit that mold are either academically, maybe you didn't do so well in high school and your grades are not going to help you get to the level program you want right away. So you go to junior college and you really work on getting your grades up those 2 years. And then those schools that you initially wanted are going to now be more interested after you've proven that you're going to be academically stable at the collegiate level. And then on the other side, if your tennis isn't really at the level where you need it to be to get to the schools you'd like to go to, you go to a junior college to really work on your game and increase your level while you're there to be more attractive to those schools that you wanted 2 years ago. So, and then coaches, that's a really good option because it's a much cheaper route. Junior college is very inexpensive. Well, we say that in the U.S. colleges. Some people might not realize how expensive U.S. colleges are. I mean, a couple of the schools I worked at, the tuition was $60,000 a year. So junior college can cost maybe $5,000 a year, $10,000 at the high end if you're not getting any help. And then, so say you really prove yourself in junior college, now you might get yourself a scholarship to that Division I program that you really wanted to go to, and they know now that you're capable of living away from home and to study and train at the same time, so you're a little bit safer bet as well for some of the coaches. So that's a quick snapshot of sort of the different divisions, and hopefully that gave a little bit of an idea.
Yeah, that's great. What, who decides sort of what division you go into and so on? Yeah, especially NCAA. I think that's, like you said, the most popular one, the thing people most know.
Well, I guess no one really decides other than your credentials kind of decide for the most part, other than if you really know you want to go to college in the U.S., you need to start making sure starting in year 9 that you're taking the classes that will make you eligible to play at that in the division NCAA umbrella. So there's certain requirements, certain number of math courses, English courses, social sciences that you need to take to be eligible. So it's important that you don't decide all of a sudden halfway into your year 11 and you want to go to college and then you find out you're missing 5 courses that you can't make up in that amount of time. So that's why with what I do, it's important, even if you just have a consultation to just see, okay, where are you at? Let's make sure if this is something you're thinking about doing, make sure you take these classes. The good news is for Australian athletes is generally it seems like that's not a huge problem, but sometimes when you're working with athletes from some, Eastern Europe and some other countries, it's not as simple. But beyond that, it's going to be based on your level. So I have a statistic, I should have had that ready, but generally, I mean, there's no set number, right? UTR seems to be the sort of go-to thing these days for coaches, which is good and bad. But, the range I would say for on the women's side to play Division I is somewhere from an 8 and above UTR. And then, but that's not, again, it's not set in stone. There's a lot of variables that play into it and depends a lot on your budget and what you want to study and how your trajectory is. Like maybe you started late, but in the last year you've gone from a 6 to a 9. So there's a lot of variables which is sort of like my job what I do to try to tell that story and help. But, the reality is there's so many opportunities out there to play college tennis if you want to continue to study and play, really.
I think that you were saying it earlier. All the kids that I've coached that's what I've tried to tell them is it depends what you want. There's so many colleges in America, and I think for at least my experience in South Africa and Australia is there aren't that many universities, especially in comparison to America. Mm-hmm. So you try and tell them, you can play, I think we played 30 matches in about 8 weeks, all against different colleges, and they're going, what?
Yeah.
You go, yeah, and then next year we didn't even play half those colleges that we played, just played completely different colleges.
Yeah.
And you're trying to go, there's so many options out there. And for you trying to find a place, that you like and that suits what you want out of it, is really important.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, the two big things I would say to anyone that's younger that doesn't know much about this is really just that, I don't want to say, I mean, you have to have played to some extent, but you really don't have to be that high up in your rankings or, I think a lot of people think, and of course this is generic to the U.S., but I have to be the best in the state of New York. Or no, you don't at all. On the women's side, there's tons of scholarships because part of that is Title IX and gender equality. So there are teams, especially I have a really good friend that coaches NAIA at a nice school outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and he's like begging for kids. And they're not full rides at that level, but you're still going to be able to compete and have a really great experience. So not to really.
I think you might need to.
What's that?
Just elaborate. I think you might need to elaborate a little bit on Title IX.
Oh, sorry. So Title IX is something that came into effect in the 70s, I think. I should know a little bit more. Well, it's really actually much more complicated than most people realize. But essentially, it's about giving equal opportunity to men and women. But it's not that simple. So a lot of people, especially guys, complain, the women get 8 scholarships, we only get 4. Well, we have, obviously, as you know, American football is a pretty big sport here, and they use 80 scholarships for football. So to try to balance it out, women's tennis, sports like tennis have more scholarships for the women, That being said, it's also relative to the population of the campus. So if the campus is 80% men and 20% women, that will reflect in the scholarship. So again, it can get a lot more complicated than just equality in terms of numbers. But the good news on the women's side is it does protect the women's sports a little bit more in terms of stuff, of course, like this COVID right now, and budgets being cut, and some sports being, cut at different schools. Women's sports are slightly safer to keep those numbers legal, really.
Yeah. I think we have a question. Alex is asking us, what's the general guide for UTR for the boys?
For the boys, I have a slide somewhere. Of course, I'm not on my normal laptop. So Division 1, I would say probably minimum 10-5 for Division 1. Division 3, you're talking about, they're all academic scholarships. The thing there is you're going to spend more money to go to Division 3 no matter who you are. But on the flip side, some of these schools you're talking about, like University of Chicago is the top 5 business school in the world. So I always joke that you're going to make that money back the year after you graduate and you get a job making $10 million a year. No. So, and then, but I think in general to play college tennis, a guy could be, put it this way, I'm working with a kid right now who, his UTR is lower than his level because he's barely played tournaments. He's turned 16, so he's going into his junior year of high school. And he's like, on paper, he's like a 4.9, which is obviously pretty low. But he just played a tournament last week and was up a set in 4-0 and lost in 3 sets, which is not a reflection of my coaching, I hope, but it was a reflection, honestly, of his experience or lack of experience. But the guy was a 7-something. So I believe this kid, within the year and a half, if he commits himself, could definitely play college tennis. Probably his best bet to me would be NAIA, but maybe he could play Division II, but he does want to stay in Florida, which Division II level in Florida is higher because it's Florida and people want to live in Florida because it's on the ocean. Some of it's on the ocean, and so division all of the school, not all, but a lot of the schools in certain parts of the country, the level of tennis is higher than other parts because of the location.
Yeah, I think again, a lot of people won't understand the conferences and how they work, and I guess that also goes into it, the different strengths, and each conference, some are stronger than others, and so on and so forth. The stronger conferences, and maybe could you explain just how that works for the kids? Is you win your conference, you go to a national tournament, so on.
Well, yeah, and that's not just Division 1. So, and I can't say that I know exactly how it works in every division, but at the end of the day, I think the most important thing, or what you should care about if you really want to play college tennis, is where you're going to play on that team. I mean, unless you really don't care if you play. So say you just want to say you played for Stanford, but you never actually played. If that makes you happy, who am I to judge? But at the end of the day, if you want to go and actually be part of a team and compete, my opinion is you should try to go on a team where you're going to be playing around 4 on the team, normally 6 plays singles, because the 2 kids I was talking about that were my teammates, they were always fighting for that 6th spot and not playing as much as I think they could have played, we won national titles, so they could have played at some really good schools all the time. And probably, one of them transferred her senior year to Chapel Hill and was number 1 on their team, because that was before UNC was what they are now, which is one of the top programs in the nation. But she was actually part of building that program to what it is today. So I think she enjoyed that year a lot more than clawing her way to play 6 once every 3 months. So, at the end of the day, it's all relative to your level. So we have to sometimes throw our ego a little bit to the side and say, okay, like, I'm not going to develop very much if I'm never competing. That's generally not a good recipe for development. So it all kind of goes into that mix of what your goals are. If you want to develop, you have to be competing, not just practicing. We all know that player that practices really well, and then once the score starts mattering, things change.
Things exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. You mentioned earlier about year 9 selecting school subjects and so on. What, apart from the school subjects, just in general, what do you say? Okay, I have college tennis become something that's interesting to me, and I'm thinking about doing it. Where should I start? I know you said school subjects. There's other stuff that goes in with that.
I think, again, competing, because today the buzzword is the UTR, and you need to have statistics to show. I'm working with a couple players, and I recently got off a call with a coach, and I know this player's good enough to play there. And this is a coach that I'm good friends with, and so even that being the case, it's not good enough, because coaches, again, their jobs are on the line every year, especially with these different cuts happening. They really have to be careful with making bad decisions, and especially when I'm working with international players, where the cost is more expensive for a school to have an international player than a domestic, so then you're even taking an extra risk. And the reality is, the coach, while we were on the phone, went on UTR and just said, I don't see any competitive matches against players at above a 9 UTR, and I can't, I love you and we're good friends, but I can't, so I hung up on her. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. And I understand, because I coached for 11 years, and at the end of the day, it's very difficult if you have nothing to show. So it's really important that and again, of course, in this situation in particular, it's really difficult, as you know, with Kiana too, so I wasn't talking about Kiana, just don't worry, Kiana, this wasn't you, that you're in lockdown, or we had lockdown all over the world for a few months, and then in Australia you had bushfires, and and there's nothing you can do about it, and we just have to work around stuff like that. But obviously at year 9 you have opportunities in 4 years, hopefully, to get those numbers and those matches in, and I really think the good coaches, they don't need you to have crazy wins, and they just need to see potential. They need to see, okay, you're only at the Division I women's level, you're only a 9, but you had a really 7-6, 7-6 loss to a 10-5, or that shows you can compete, and maybe the reason you don't have more of those results is because of opportunity and that kind of thing. So competing, I think, is huge. And then for U.S. college, obviously the SAT is something you can't, well, maybe this year you don't have to take because they're waiving it, but generally that becomes pretty important in terms of...
How early could you start taking the SAT? I'm sorry, guys, just quickly, for those of you who don't know what the SAT is, it's basically a university entrance exam, standardized entrance exam to college in America.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. It's just math and English, and some people, we all know, don't test well. But the good news with the SAT and entrance is, if you have a super high grade point average and you don't do great on the SAT, it's a sliding scale. So the higher your GPA, the less high your SAT has to be, and vice versa. So if you really do well on the SAT and your grades are okay, that's going to help overall. The good thing with the SAT is you can take it as many times as you want, and there's no penalty for it. All they care about is taking your best score. If you take the SAT 5 times, they're going to take your best math score out of those 5 times and your best English score out of those 5 times and combine them, and that's your SAT score. So I would really suggest, for kids serious about looking at this pathway, take practice. You can go online. I guarantee you can Google SAT practice exams. Because part of the hard part of the SAT is just getting used to how you take it, and understanding that I think this is still true. It was definitely true when I took it a few years ago, that you're supposed to answer every question, even if you run out of time. Just put anything, because it's better than leaving it blank. So there's all these kinds of things that if you know, rather than spending 10 minutes on one question, you're actually better off, just getting answers in. So don't hold me to it, but that was what it was like, and I'm pretty sure it's still similar. So there's all kinds of little, if you study a little bit and read about it, there's little tricks you'll learn that will improve your scores just by knowing them.
There's a lot of information out there about it.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
So competing, school subjects, doing the SAT. In terms of competing at any specific tournaments, are sort of ITFs a better way to go for internationals, or what do you think? With UTR, is that changing?
I think, I mean, of course, coaches, if you can show them your top 200 ITF, that's gonna mean something. I think it really just depends where you live and what access you have to what and your financial situation. But the good news is everything seems to be going mostly into UTR system. So whatever you're playing, I mean, of course, you need to be playing ideally events that have kids that are on paper better than you, so that you can potentially compete against players that are supposedly better than you and show that you're as good or better than them. So it's all relative, I think.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
In terms of seasons, because obviously we know, having played, you have your fall season and your spring season. Could you just go into some of the differences there?
Yeah, so I think, traditionally in the U.S., of course, we finish high school in June or May, and then we start school and college in August, September. Obviously, for Aussies, one of the attractive things for athletes from Australia is that you're finishing school in November, December, so you could potentially start right away in January. It's not appealing to the parents. Usually, well, it depends. Some parents are very ready to get their kid out of the house. They're like, yes. But, it's a pretty quick turnaround. But what happens is sometimes the opportunities you'll get in January might be better opportunities than you might get in that following fall, because something went wrong, like the kid got hurt or tore their ACL. So now the coach is last minute kind of looking for a replacement, where if they had more time, maybe you wouldn't be on their list, but now that you're one of 2-3 people that are available to potentially even start in January, all of a sudden that puts you up ahead. So my opinion there is, if you get the school that you really like, find your way to get there in January. But the difference is, in the fall, it's all individual. In Division I, it's all individual competition. I think it's also the same in Division II.
NAIA, I know, was the same.
Yeah, so you're competing, potentially you could play your teammates. So you go to a tournament and they typically separate teammates apart from each other, so you don't play your teammate the first day. But if I win 3 matches in a row and my teammate wins, we might potentially meet each other in the quarterfinals or whatever. And in the spring, you're only competing as a team, so you would only play someone from an opposing team. You would never play someone on your own team. But the fall, I think, is super important, that some people don't put enough importance on, because in the fall, so say I'm playing number 4 for Georgia, and in the spring I'm only going to play every 4 player from every school. So I'm not going to play Stanford's number 1 if I'm playing 4. But in the fall, I could potentially play Stanford's number 1 because the draw is open. So I could have opportunity to beat players in the fall that I won't have opportunity to play in the spring, which is all about where I can get my ranking. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to build your ranking in the fall.
So it's more like traditional tournaments, the fall.
Yep. And you play a ton of matches. Like, you'll go to a tournament and you'll lose like 5 times and keep playing. Like, because coaches just want to see the kids competing, because they really are trying to figure out their lineup for the spring. So a lot of coaches just, they'll throw you out there all day.
Do in fall especially, a lot of coaches, I believe, take kids to futures and tours around the country. Is that?
Yeah, that's a more new thing, but and that's really relative to level of the team and the program.
Yeah.
The best program I coached in terms of level was Wisconsin, and I had 1, maybe 2 players that could play at that level, but we never did it, because really, if you go to a pro tournament and you lose first round, you get 1 match. If you go to a fall tournament and we go to Berkeley and we play in the fall tournament, they get 5 matches. So for development, but in today's world, if I'm recruiting, if I were a college coach at a pretty top program, that's certainly something I would offer a top recruit, because a lot of these recruits that have their goal is to play after college, it's super nice to go on to tour with a couple points under your belt rather than starting, as we know, right? So, and of course, that's a huge recruiting kind of appeal. That's how you can get the top kid. You say, hey, we're going to pay for you to go play for 4 WTA events or whatever.
Yeah. And then I'm sure I know it's changed quite a bit, and there's certain rules that go around it. But generally, your training weeks as a coach, how do they look for most schools? Obviously, it varies school to school.
Yeah. So again, D3 I think is not going to be as hardcore, but again, the D1 level, you're training 6 days a week, and you're maxed out at 4 hours a day. That includes strength and conditioning. So if you're on the court 2.5 hours, they can do strength and conditioning and running for another hour and a half.
Okay.
And yeah, it's pretty full on. So I would say, one of the
Do you know the limit for hours per week?
20.
Is it 20? Yeah, 20.
Whether everyone completely follows that, I'm not sure I could say honestly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
And then-
lot of voluntary workouts going on.
Is there in terms of sort of, so you mentioned strength and conditioning, I know we've spoken about it before, is sort of a lot of the coaches I've spoken to are doing lifting sessions 3 times a week. We were saying conditioning they're pretty much doing almost daily in some form.
Mm-hmm.
Tennis generally, it's normally about 2 hours from my understanding?
Well,
Okay.
again, the fall is probably where they're going to do a lot heavier conditioning and lifting. In the spring, they'll slow it down a little bit because of the matches, the team matches that you're playing potentially a couple times a week. So that's the other thing I tell kids. If you go in the fall, don't go sitting on the beach drinking pina coladas all summer and get to school because you're going to get hurt because they're going to push you very hard.
Yeah.
And if you haven't done anything for 3 months, you're going to have issues. If you don't get hurt, you're going to be very unhappy at the very least.
Yeah.
So I think it varies, but I mean my teams did 3 days a week in the fall in the morning, 6 to 7 a.m. in strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
And if we traveled Fridays, we did like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah. Were you playing a lot of matches? Sort of how many matches do you generally get a week?
Well, so the rule is 25 total for your year, but in the fall when you play tournaments, so say we go to Berkeley to play, we play Friday, Saturday, Sunday in a fall tournament, that only counts as one date.
Yeah.
So generally we play 4 to 5 tournaments in the fall, which consist of 3 days, and then, so say we played 5, then we'd have 20 matches in the spring. That being said, if you play 2 matches in one day, it only counts as one date.
Oh, interesting.
Which some schools do. There's a lot of reasons behind it because to make the NCAA tournament, you have to be better than 500 percentage. So if you have a really tough schedule, a lot of coaches schedule kind of an easy team in the morning that they can get a win. And then if they play a tough team in the afternoon, then that day they split the matches, and that helps for their 500 record. So yeah, that can be. It got pretty ugly for a few years there because when they changed that rule, they changed it to the 500 rule. I feel like it wasn't that long ago, but it probably was. And like I think it was Alabama or Arkansas played like 4 matches in one day, like something crazy, where just to get the wins, so that their win-loss record. It was not. I think they've changed some things since then, but yeah, you could play 2 matches. I know Navy plays 2 matches a day a lot, but they also have a very big roster. So sometimes I might play in the first wave of matches, and then I might not play in the second wave.
Yep. We've got a question from Julian asking us about your Australian ranking. Would college coaches take your Tennis Australia ranking into account as well as your UTR?
They will, but unfortunately, it's just not enough coaches know enough about the level. So then, there's rankings in every country, and obviously Australia is a bigger country, and it would be more likely they'd know a little bit. But I think if they're going to pick one, they're going to pick UTR.
Yeah, I think that's been my experience so far. Is even and I know we've spoken about it, Tina, but generally the UTR is good, but it does tend to vary slightly from region to region. And even I spoke to one college coach who said he found the UTRs so different in Australia to America, so he actually wanted to come out and see the Australians play so he could get the level for himself. So like you're saying, I think they do take it into account.
Yeah.
And it's not going to, if you've got a good Tennis Australia ranking, but at the moment UTR seems to be king.
Yeah, because the other thing is, like, when I coached college, in those 11 years, quite a few of those years I was on different committees, and that were ranking committees, where one of the years I had to look at a list of all the incoming freshmen from all over the world and like rank them, and I'm like, this is insane. This is before UTR2, so I'm like, how do I know if the number 4 player in Poland is better than the number 8 player in the Czech Republic? I have no clue, right? So
Yeah.
it's super hard. There's no perfect system, no doubt, but again, I think that's why, going back to just competing, and so if you have enough match results, the more real number will come through at some point, or it will be closer to a real number.
Yeah. But just back to training quickly. I know when I was at college, there wasn't. I'll be honest with you, with no mental training. But I do know, speaking to a couple of the kids that I've sent to college now, that some of them have their own session with the sports psychologist. Sometimes they do team sessions, sometimes twice a week. How does that vary college to college? And
Yeah, again, that's way more common now. It's certainly going to be to some extent budget related, but I would say probably most campuses, not just, even if it's not for athletics, but it could potentially be just on-campus resource that you have access to as a student, not an athlete. So worst case, you would have at least access to that as a student at that school, especially with all the different things that have gone on in the last 10, 20 years in terms of mental health and everything. And then athletic departments generally, it's sort of like you have advisors and academic advisors as a student, and then you have, if you're an athlete, you have an athletic academic advisor, so you have both, so you just get like double. So so it's going to vary a lot from school to school and budget, but at Wisconsin, they had nutritionists, they had sports psych, we had team sports psych, we had really, you're getting probably access to more things than most professional athletes have access to.
In terms of sort of coaching, how many times do you get, do the coaches generally just do team practices? So for Australians, it'd be like a squad, or do you get to spend a lot of time doing private lessons with the coaches? How does that type of stuff work?
Again, unfortunately, that's so program to program. I try to have team practices every day, and then a little bit of that depends on school schedules. I think when you and I played, the coach was just like, sorry, you can't go to that class. You just have to.
Yep.
That's not really as legal anymore. So you do have to try to work around the academic schedules a little bit more. So in some cases, I had athletes that twice a week couldn't be at regular practice because they had no other option to take this class, which was tough to deal with. But so anyway, long story short, I used to do team practice, and then I try to do at least one individual every week with every player, and then one semi-private with every player. But there are coaches that don't do any of those individuals. There's coaches that only do them if you ask for them. There's coaches that only do individuals or only do half the team twice a day. And so that's another thing, like, again, with what I do in terms of helping athletes, those are the questions we ask and find out, because I might work with an athlete that really likes that one-on-one or needs that one-on-one, and if that program's not offering that ever, then that's not a good fit.
Yeah. Guys, I got another video here just of a college athlete and what a day in the life of a college athlete. So let's just take a look at that quickly and we'll get back to you in a little bit. Tina, if we can just turn off the mics again.
Hey guys, it's Justin Levine on the Gopher men's tennis team. Just like to welcome you to a day in my life. First we have lifting at the Ritter Arena, and then I have some class, and then after that some practice. I'm a sophomore, however I like to eat breakfast here before I go lift with the team. Our freshman over here, Steffi, he'll be lifting with us today as well. Alrighty, so we normally we lift at 8:15. However, our strength coach likes us to be about 5 to 10 minutes early to every lift. So we're heading over there. It's now about 7:50. Baseline Tennis Center, shared with the women's hockey team with Rita, and it's pretty much where I spend most of my day. We just got done with a bit of a short lift as we leave for Big Tens tomorrow, so we didn't want to be too sore for our match on Thursday. Now we're going to head to class. I have astronomy lecture at 9:40 over on West Bank, so come on join us. Hey guys, so back at baseline. It's about 1:30 before practice starts at 2. I've got the Normatec leg sleeves on, which help blood flow and kind of recovery. Makes your legs feel good. So this will be on for about 10 minutes, and then I'll head into the locker room and get ready for a good practice. Hey guys, just finished a great practice. We're all ready to go with a Big Ten. We leave for Indiana tomorrow morning at 7:30. Right now I'm gonna go get changed and probably get some homework done and get ready to leave in the morning. I hope you really enjoyed a day in my life, and I'll see you guys later.
Don't forget to turn your microphones back on, guys.
Can you hear me, Craig?
Yep, got it.
Perfect. So like I was saying, guys, it's just an idea. That's one college, like Tina was saying, it's very program specific.
You had to pick Minnesota, like my rival school.
Yeah, I said to Kiana, do you know a good one to look at? And she said, that's a good one. So I said, okay. But if you can go and look at all of those, and they'll give you a really good idea of how college life for a tennis athlete is. And as Tina was saying earlier, the facilities at college are better than a lot of the professionals get. To be honest, you won't get a better facility. I know Astra Sharma, who a lot of you guys will know, she does a lot of her training still at Vanderbilt. She went to Vanderbilt and still goes back and does a lot of training there because of the facilities and the players that she has access to. Tina, it's as far as that kind of stuff goes, and just in general, I mean, like you were saying, it's very dependent upon what your desires are, what you want out of college. What are the advantages to going to a US college or playing college tennis?
Well, I think the obvious is just that you can do both, which, as you said, it really doesn't exist at this level anywhere else in the world. And then walk away, like John Isner said, with a degree where even if you don't turn pro, or if you turn pro and you don't make a living, that you have a great degree to fall back on. Or if you get injured, as many athletes do, career-ending injury, and then you have something to fall back on. I think that's huge. I think the other thing is what I've seen a lot with even myself, but a lot of teammates too, is when you're done playing and you're looking at jobs, and employers are looking at your resume and they see that you've competed at that level and gotten a degree and done that well, it immediately, most employers I think believe that you're going to have certain qualities that come along with that, which is teamwork, handling pressure, handling deadlines, being able to handle adversity, time management. There's so many different things that you learn as a student athlete that directly translate to really anything you do afterwards. It doesn't have to be athletics. It's just certain qualities that come along with competing and studying at that level and being successful
Yeah, I think also, like you were saying earlier, there's just so much more to it than the actual tennis and the results, the friendships. Just traveling, I saw. I've been to West Coast of America, East Coast, Central America, South Coast, and northern parts of the state. So I traveled the whole country playing through tennis, and it was great. I got to see a lot of it.
No,
Brilliant.
and that too, other than that, is also the networking, right? So these universities generally have alumni from all over the world. So when you graduate from these schools and then you add to it that you're on the tennis team, so then you have tennis alumni, so people that have all the years prior to Europe competing there that are part of what they call your family, right? They're resources immediately that you have. So the second you finish, like say you get a degree in business and they say, oh, well, we have 4 former players that work on Wall Street that you should connect with. Let me tell you, that foot in the door is a big deal. So I think whatever career you're going to, of course, you have to get the grades and whatever. But at the end of the day, it's going to open up a lot of doors for you just because of who you are and what you've done and who you've represented. It's a big deal here. Yeah.
Definitely. We've got a couple of questions from Luca. Luca wants to know the application process, and then once you're in college, are the performance targets you have to meet to remain in the program?
So the application process is, there's something called the NCAA Eligibility Center, which you could Google and find online, and you just make a player profile, and they start telling you what kind of things you have to hand in, which is your transcripts from your different school years and your grades and your test scores and things like that. And they walk you through it a little bit in terms of, like, if they say you're missing something, you'll get a flag that says that we're missing this or missing that. If you start talking to coaches, they'll let you know exactly what you're missing, what you need, if they're interested. But and then at school, for sure, yeah, you can't just go and stop studying, or you're going to be held accountable more so, again, than back in my day and I think your day, in terms of especially the academic performance side of things. So every school is going to be a little bit different, but to even be eligible in NCAA, I think you have to, now at this point, it's a 2.6 GPA to be eligible in the NCAA system coming out of high school. But that's bare. I mean, I'm sure most of everyone listening is doing a little bit better than that. But and then once you're there, the expectations are going to be, they vary from school to school, but the reality is the coaches are now held accountable, which is good, because before, when they weren't held accountable, they just didn't care how, I shouldn't say some coaches, not all, not the majority, but we're just all about competing, and all right, well, as long as you don't fail out of school, we don't care. So now they're held accountable. So even if they did have that mindset, that they don't have a choice, they have to change that, because if you have athletes not passing school, then you lose scholarships, which is not good for anyone, because that has a bigger impact than just your team. So I will say that tennis is one of the sports on most campuses that has some of the best student athletes.
Yeah, my experience, same thing.
Yeah.
Guys, I put the link up just in the chat to the Eligibility Center if you just want to have a look at that sometime. It is there. I think, Tina, like you were saying earlier, you said the coaches, I've seen a lot of athletes get upset. The coach, all he cares about is if I win or lose, or she cares about if I win or lose. I think what a lot of kids need to remember is it's also their job. They're competitive people too. They want to win.
Yeah.
So it's something I just think as tennis players, you do need to learn to handle.
Yeah, I just think it can be done in a way that's fair, because 11 years college coaching, not every player I coach thinks I'm great or a nice person, but I felt like I was always very fair. It was like I played at a program where you expected to win, and if you didn't win, that could potentially mean that you're not going to be on the team, which was pretty hardcore. But my expectation was always just show up. And again, we all have bad days. This isn't like you have to show up every day and be a great person, but generally show up, have a good attitude, work hard. And if you never win, it's my job to figure out why. And as long as you're doing what we're asking you to do, then two of my favorite athletes I coached both probably had some of the worst records in college tennis in terms of wins and losses, but they were great kids, great attitudes, and different stories for both of them. And I didn't technically either recruit either of them, weird situations, but my point is, especially if I recruit the player, if I made a mistake and recruited a player that isn't as good as I expected, that's on me. That's not on her or him, right? Then it's my job to find a way to make them better and kind of make up for that error, or so to speak. As long as they put in the work, then that's all you can ask. So I think as long as coaches, but if you don't, I think that's where it gets really ugly and difficult, because, like you said, the coaches' jobs are on the line as well. And if I recruit a kid, which I've done, that I thought was going to be this great kid and hard worker that isn't, then I have a boss asking me, why'd you recruit him?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a tough one.
All right, guys. At this stage, if you guys have any questions, I know we have to end it up pretty soon. So if you guys have any questions, I see that Julian's asking about if they only take UTRs into account, is there any point in having an Australian ranking? I think the answer to that, Julian, is the Tennis Australia tournaments that you play do count towards your UTR. It's not just UTR tournaments. I think Tino was saying earlier, pretty much any tournament you play does go towards your UTR these days. So, yes, is the short answer to it. And then we've got Sam asking how possible is transferring and what are the reasons you're allowed to transfer?
So, of course, the goal is for that not to happen, but it happens, and sometimes it happens out of no one's fault. It could be that you go to a school and it's not a good fit, and it's not because you're doing anything wrong or the coach. It's just there was a mistake in terms of vetting it better, and so most of the time in that case, it's the coach is going to be okay with it. And in general, honestly, as a student athlete, you have more of the power. So very, very, very rare in tennis that there would be any kind of saying, no, you can't. I mean, in sports like football, basketball, they will sometimes say, well, you can transfer, but these are the schools you can't transfer to because they're rivals. And they could potentially mean you're now going to lose to those teams. But in tennis, it's not so much, very rare that would happen. You could transfer maybe because you go and either you're way too good for the program in terms of level, or you're the opposite. You're really not competing and you're not getting the practice or matches, and you feel like you want to go somewhere where you do. So obviously, if you're on the side where you're the best player, the coach is going to be more unhappy that you're leaving because obviously you're very good. But I'd like to believe that coaches would respect that if it's really clear and understand that, it's not working out if you're not getting good practice because you're just that much better. You could transfer because you decide you want to study forensics and the school doesn't offer that, which, most schools in the U.S. offer pretty much everything, but if you get more specific, there's a potential that maybe you didn't know when you were going to college that you would fall in love with some crazy major that's not offered at a lot of places. So, but even that being said, because I know the system in Australia is different, in Europe too, they have physios, not physical therapists. It's a little bit different. There's usually a pathway you could take. Like, so say your school doesn't offer nursing. In the U.S., generally there's a pathway you could still take at a school that doesn't have nursing that would still give you what you need to go into nursing once you finish.
We've got Luca asking us, as a guide, do you have to be best in your age group in Australia to consider college?
No, not even close.
Yep. Exactly. Luca, as Tina was saying, there's just so many options in America, and you need to decide what you're looking for in a college, and because there's so many options, there's a good chance you're going to be able to find that fit for you.
And that's one thing I'll say, just if anyone that after this can get my information, from Cliff, and I'm more than happy to get on a call, obviously free, just to talk through where you're at and kind of, in my opinion, sort of whether it makes sense or not. But I would say more often than not, it can make sense if you're committed to it, and if you're not in if you're graduating in December and you haven't played any tournaments, probably not the pathway for you. But I think I'm more than happy to help out if you're not sure.
Guys, I put Tina's link up to her website that you can get in touch with her. And I'm also going to just play one more video, and then it's just Kevin Anderson talking about his experience at college. So we'll play this, and then we'll just finish off.
Up until my last year of juniors, my second year, college wasn't really on our radar. It was turning pro. I started traveling a little bit more my second year of 18s, a lot of ITF juniors. I played a few of the slams, and but gradually throughout the year, I got more calls from college, coaches, and it seemed like it was actually a pretty good, option for me. I think one of the tougher things coming from South Africa is just we were so far from the tennis scene. I think a lot of the information we got was through, Tennis Magazine, we're obviously watching the slams on TV and a few other tournaments, but we weren't really part of that mix. My dad, I remember, used to cut up a lot of Tennis Magazine books, and we had this big binder, and I remember browsing through that, for hours, and that was, reading about Lendl and, McEnroe and Borg and the rivalries and stuff, and I think part of that actually, made us work even harder because, we didn't exactly know, what it was like, in other countries and in other parts of the world, and I think that sort of really instilled in me, even from a young age, a very strong work ethic. I'm a huge advocate of college tennis. I think unless you really one of the top players in the world and making huge strides at the professional level, it's a really great opportunity. And then, when I was 21 and after 3 years, I felt I was ready to turn pro. It was definitely a big adjustment. Tennis has always been first with us, and my parents knew that this was going to be the best decision for me, and they gave me a lot of encouragement from that. Of course, when it was time to turn pro, this was something I've dreamed about since I was a kid. It was very exciting.
All right, guys. We had one more question. Are all of the good colleges in America?
Well, I don't know. I don't, definitely not. I think Oxford's pretty good. Last time I checked, there's a couple other good schools. I think, again, for a student athlete, I do think we probably do the best job still in the U.S. if you want to play sports at a really high level and study. But no, there's some great colleges all over the world, for sure.
Yeah. I think in terms of, what we're talking about is just sort of in the sport. College sports is massive in America. From what I know, you're not going to find anything comparable around the world. So yeah. And
I will say this, again, even if you don't go to one of these major schools that more of you have heard about, when you play a college sport at a school, even especially if you're in a smaller town and you walk around downtown with your tennis shirt on that says you play, people think you're cool. They're like, it's kind of funny. You're like, whoa, like you're kind of put up a little bit on a pedestal in a smaller pond than the LeBron Jameses and people like that. But you're certainly looked at like as a little bit celebrity in a lot of these places, which is sort of walking through airports when you're walking with your team and all your gear on, and it's certainly, it's a fun thing.
Yeah. Sure is. Thanks, Craig.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Cliff and Tina, for your time today. That was so informative. I think it was very motivational for a lot of our athletes. Luca, thank you for the questions. I think you're only 10 at this stage, so you've got a lot of planning ahead of you. So you're well on the road. Maybe 11. Perhaps I'm selling you short. But we had a lot of younger people here, and a couple in year 9. I noticed Olivia was there. We loved seeing your house in Halifax, Olivia, too. That was great on the television. So, anyway, thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Cliff.
Yeah, thank you.
You can contact Tina through the website, which is acecoach.com.au. Cliff has shared the link there, so just acecoach.com.au. and she'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow at
Thanks, Tina.
9:30 for Fitness with George. Come with your chair and your yoga mat and your TheraBands. Bye.
See you.